Hello, everyone. Welcome
Hello.
to let's call it a post-mortem on our game on the game VVVVV. So
I like the term I like the term capstones. I think we should go with that.
Capstone's way better. Yeah, you're right. That because this isn't a critique of the tactics or the how, or like how we are going to improve the game in the future. This is just a discussion of our overall experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you want to start your discussion of VVV since you're the one who recommended it to me?
Mm-hmm. Well, you're the one who went in with bright eyes. Like, I played that game a lot, and so I have a lot of opinions on it, and I think I expressed a lot of them during the recording. That, for me, that game is very much an epitome of good game design, in the sense that it took one core mechanic and thoroughly explored all the iterations and ramifications of that core mechanic and how it interacts with newly introduced ideas and how each one gets explored with each quote-unquote dungeon, for lack of a better term, or zone, I guess would be more accurate. Yeah. And I think it's just a really great object lesson in what good, straightforward game design is. And as I said in the series, I'm just a huge Terry Kavanagh fanboy and love everything he does. And that's, if you were to ask me what kind of games I think should be taught in game design classes, VVVVV would be one of them.
What are so going back in the conversation a little bit, so just to you, the core of game design that's expressed here is a simple mechanic, and you get to see all the implied depth, what that mechanic can do, and how it interacts with different things. So for you, the real joy was just seeing like the responsiveness of it, the simplicity of it, and seeing how it can interact, and that basically enlivened your imagination. It took everything that was implied with just the ability to turn upside down in time, and showed like a huge variety of situations to take advantage of that, and also to frustrate you, as I can recall very vividly from Vini Vidi Vici, or doing things the hard way.
Just that one little fucking block.
Yep.
Just a tiny pixel caused all that heartache. I love it.
And you think that mechanical thing should be so you're saying you think the mechanical base of something simple that you then like really think hard about how this implies depth and how to create level design, because to me the biggest thing that stood out was really the level design to this mechanics and how that really played with my player psychology. And like there were all these little like fun things in the level that moved back and forward that was clearly like the developer sharing things that they love, or like sharing things that really amuse them. I'm thinking of the ghost that goes up and down in one levels that doesn't like even fit, but it just sort of fits with the mechanics and like the spirit of the game. So like the game had an oddly fun spirit, which was especially expressed in its soundtrack.
I love that soundtrack.
Yeah.
So for me, like talking about game mechanics, it's, if you want good game design, is really you're all games are really, if you're talking about gameplay, and game design is mostly concerned with gameplay first. Story elements are kind of tangential. As much as I'm a huge story buff, what makes the game a game is its interactivity, and so the gameplay, the core mechanics, are the most important part. And the reason that like VVVV shines, in my opinion, is because it takes that one mechanic, the inverting gravity, and that's really all there is. It doesn't introduce like a crafting system, checkpoints, like none of that garbage or like fluff that I called it in AAA games, and then introduces variations of that mechanic and see how it interacts with stuff coming to mind of like this example where they introduced the strings that would change your gravity for you, so you were interacting with those and bouncing off of those, and how that changed it created interesting design choices. Or the section where it becomes sort of an escort mission and you have to use the mechanic to control the movement of another person, or the section that had a lot of just moving platforms that created additional difficulty based on that core mechanic. Those are all different iterations of that core mechanic that are explored in each zone, and that's, to me, like the pinnacle of good game design. And then, as I also said in our finale episode, it ends with how most games should end, in which the quote-unquote final boss, metaphorical and literal, should be an encapsulation of everything the player has learned at that point. And in VVVV, it's that long stretch of difficult terrain that you recall after you activate the dimension stabilizer or destabilizer, where you just put everything you learn to use, culminating in that long like tracking dungeon at the very end. And to me, that's just perfect game design.
Yeah, so that's what you said with interactivity is basically what I said with level design, where like the level design is really showing like different ideas on how, like each level had like a different theme on how to use the mechanics. I can recall the strings basically turning the invert gravity into a jump, because since it inverts gravity again, it's not quite adding a new mechanic onto it. It's just like you just get inverted. That one made you smile. But I think that we're both pretty much in consensus about what we feel that the game is a great example of game design because of all the things that we just mentioned. Now let's talk about more subjective stuff, like how we felt about it at each moment, if you wouldn't mind.
You mean like how angry you were at VVVVV?
Oh my fucking god! Oh my god! So like, I can't actually call that anger, because I was definitely like in the zone. By the end of it, I was being zen-like. Like I kept failing, and the failure. I'm generally okay with failure, especially in video games, because it's a part of the experience. Like I would prefer not to.
It's the classic tough. It's the classic tough but fair.
Yeah. In VVVVV it was the same way, and that made me think like VVVVV straight up made me feel a gestalt and like meditative flow where I was really fixated on it. And that failure is necessary to get to that. That is actually part of the enjoyment. I think that if I had just beat that level one shot and not had trouble with it, I would have had a very different experience with it. And that's actually one of the reasons why I love difficulty as well. So this game to me was a really good. I'll compare it to Kaizo games because it's not as hard as a Kaizo game even by a long shot, but it kind of gave me the same feeling of that meditative, overcoming, triumphant feeling. And obviously VVVVV was the best example of that. The end of the game was another good example of it. I would say lesser than VVVVV because we weren't stuck on it for like 2 days.
Well, VVVVV, as I tried to warn you, it was literally the toughest challenge in the game.
Well,
if the game had come out when achievements were a thing, that would have been the final achievement, the secret boss.
Well, yeah, but like, I'm one of those gamers who if they find out that they can access the secret boss at level 1, I'm going to try and conceive of a strategy to try and fight that boss at level 1 and see if that can work. And then like the point of that is you fail a lot, but you get to figure things out. Like in Final Fantasy IX, if you can do certain actions to control what actions the bosses will take, and then you have a completely different measurement in what you can accomplish. Like as soon as you figure out that you can kind of stall the ATB battle system, except for one person, Zidane is like the strongest person in your party, because you can make it so that the opponent is not regenerating ATB, but then Zidane is, as long as he is one speed stat higher. This is like going really technical into speedrunning stuff. But like they're exploring the VVV. I felt like it was exploring it was teaching me to explore the same kind of nuance that I find when I go into really in-depth research into like how to speedrun a game and how to do that, how to do higher level stuff. But it was doing that intuitively, and it was expecting the players to figure it out, which is a lovely feeling. This is definitely not a game for everyone. It will frustrate people who want to succeed, as opposed to want to get an interesting experience. Like, God.
Yeah, I agree. I also do want to circle back briefly to the flow you mentioned, because I believe that is such a core part of the gameplay.
Oh, yeah.
I really think, well, with the difficulty and it's being very fair, it's getting to that state of flow. That's a challenge, and a lot of games are sometimes built specifically just to induce that feeling. Like that's their entire goal in the first place, and for VV to just have that as kind of a part of it, I think is another example of its accomplishments. Like the recent re-release of Tetris has been going for that. I mean, there's one of the first like indie darlings, Everyday Shooter, was a king of that. It's hard to describe, but one of those things that's sought after by a lot of games, and it requires like excellent controls, excellent atmosphere, and really excellent game design. I think that's praise that we can't say enough about the game.
I would agree. So I realized something now, that most of the games that you've introduced to me actually are designed to kind of introduce that state of flow. I'm thinking of this. I'm thinking of Tower of Heaven. Kind of has a state of flow to it. I'm thinking of Potato Man Seeks the Truth, which might not be out by the time we upload this. But a lot of the games that you've introduced to me introduce that state of flow. So is that part of your tastes? Is that you really just love games that are designed to introduce that state of flow, as opposed to things like I'm thinking like things like Civ 4, which are very explicitly not designed to do a state of flow. In fact, you're supposed to question your actions before you take them.
That's a really interesting question. I actually think it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, because I do really appreciate, because I think that flow comes from games that have really excellent core design and mechanics, and especially like my interest in more artsy indie games certainly gravitates towards that. But I also think it's the reason that I've introduced those games to you is because I feel like those suit your tastes. I know I picked VVVV and Tower of Heaven specifically because I already knew you liked difficult games, and they were games that I was a fan of for their artistic statements and other reasons, and so I wanted to feature them on the channel. So I think it's kind of a like I said, it's I think a chicken and egg thing. Like I do gravitate towards those. I really like that, but I think I also introduced them because I had a feeling you would too.
Well, thank you. I did quite like both of them. Tower of Heaven reminds me, with the exception of some. Well, with the exception of some of the problems with Tower of Heaven, but by that I mean me looking like an idiot. The game itself didn't cause any undue stress. Looking at you, episode 3.
That's also what happens when you step away from a game that is meant to be played in one sitting, or it introduces core mechanics that doesn't want you to forget, like forgetting that you can't walk to the left.
Yeah,
that was pretty amazing.
That was amazing as a word for it. I just realized that both VVVVV and VVVVVV and
6 V's, yeah,
and Tower of Heaven both hit the fan at episode 3 for both of them.
That's true.
So I guess episode 3 is going to be my curse now. So something that I just thought of, actually because I've been reading entrepreneurial books. In the entrepreneur books, they said that basically the way a company is designed is you develop a core culture, and you decide the values of that culture, and like you could use words like integrity or wisdom and all that, but you really just need to define it by like what you mean by that word. So you kind of need to define the word yourself, and then those words become how you judge what is good and what is worth merit. And I think games, I as soon as I read that, I realized that games and art kind of do the same thing, where every designer is deciding the words that they want to be in their game, or like the way to define like what is merit and what is good in their game. And with VVVVV, the tone, the mechanics, and the exploration of one idea. So like for me, VVVV, if it had a culture in the same way that corporate culture exists, it would definitely be the depth of one idea, or like the exploration of a single concept, and the exploration of that singular concept would be the primary value. And then of course there's this element of nostalgia in it too, because it's referencing 90s platformers, and it's clearly just taking like the element of a jump is the thing that they explore. I would say that the exploration is more important than the jump, but I'm not sure I would agree with that. And that's what I interpret as a gamer, as a player. Those are the two things that I really felt. And then like the nostalgia that the developer must have felt for these games, or like the love of video games, is expressed in the soundtrack and just in the smiling characters. This rainbow whimsical world of just this jump that is just this jump. Like that's really what I feel. It's this happy whimsical world of death and jumping. So much death.
It's so much jumping.
So much jumping.
I think that's right. I mean, I know I keep hitting on it, but really, if there's really one sort of overarching thesis statement that I want to make about VVVV, it's the purest, one of the best examples that I'm aware of game design, like high-level game design, in the sense that you take a mechanic and you explore it, and that like I said, that's why I think it's the kind of game that I think should be taught at universities for teaching up and coming game designers, because it's just so in that respect, to me, it's just sublime. There's very little that you could say is wrong with it on that level. It is just a perfect example to be used as a form of teaching. And if there was one, like as I said, I keep hitting on it, but if there was one like overarching like summary of that game, it would be that.
Okay, we're in agreement. I think that the game is sublime. If that's if that's the thing that you were looking for, then the game delivers it. And I believe that it's an expression of the developer, Terry Kavanagh, and what they like, at least their tastes, very, very well. And yeah, there's not much else to say.